Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Cadence Independent Media Production, Cymbal Series Day. Today we're talking about something tiny and wildly important. We're talking about all things cymbal felts. If you've ever showed up to a gig and either discovered that your stand didn't have felts on it, or that you had to put your cymbals on stands that didn't have felts and sleeves and stuff like that, it's a nerve-wracking experience. It may be the last time you ever get to use that cymbal if things go awry. And honestly, it was the first thing that I made sure I always had in my bag. Sleeves, felts, and at least some kind of wing nut, some sort of wing nut that'll just keep them from flying off if I get too excited. What a lot of people don't necessarily take into account is beyond the fact that these are for protecting the cymbal, they also affect the physical behavior of the cymbal, the feel of the cymbal, and the sound of it. So rather than tell you up front what you're listening for here, we wanted to go through some iterations and see what you hear as we do it. In unusual fashion here, rather than talking about it at all right now, we're going to dive through all the iterations in a row with a little bit of an explanation beneath that you can check out as they go by, and we're going to talk about them afterward. The audio here, we're talking about some subtle stuff. The feel can be dramatically different in some of these, and in a couple of them, the actual sound of it in person and in the recording is significantly different than other examples. So now we're going to talk about what exactly is going on here, and maybe like why you would choose one of these over another, or maybe why you would definitely want to not do that. First up is basically what I would consider to be the standard, which is felts on top and bottom. There's a sleeve in there to protect the cymbal from the threading, if there's anything like that on the stand that it might run into in the hole in the center, and then a standard wing nut on top. Not cinched down super tight, but close enough that the felts are touching when the cymbal moves, but, gently. We're using this as a baseline because basically this is the baseline. It's the way cymbal stands are designed. It's the way that the whole structure is supposed to work, and now we're going to start to deviate from that. Next up is no wing nut and no felt on top. This is a thing that is a backline kit situation sometimes. I've also seen it as literally a choice. I've seen cymbals fly off of cymbal stands on Saturday Night Live and other places at shows because there wasn't something on top to hold the cymbal on. This is, on the other hand, the most reverberant that you're going to get out of the cymbal because it is resting on a felt, but there's no other kind of interaction from the top. So this is kind of what I would think of as the most reverberant situation, maybe for cymbal swells with mallets or classical situations where you want the maximum everything out of the cymbal. But if you get excited, it can come flying off. And also, if you have the sort of sleeve that isn't attached to the underside where the felt is resting, the sleeve can work its way out, and then you can run into keyholing issues and stuff like that. Now we're going the other direction. We are adding thick felts and we're cinching the cymbal down super tight. I've seen this in a lot of different situations for really specific reasons. This tends to be a thing that people are choosing on purpose, either for a feel reason or for a sound and behavior reason. If we're talking crashes, this is going to make your crashing of your crash a lot faster because it's not moving around very much. So if you want to hit it a lot of times in a row, it's kind of staying put and you can have the same experience of hitting it in quick succession, whereas if it were looser or maybe with nothing on top, it's going to be moving around a lot and you might catch it, on the upswing or miss it, something like that. Now, the flip side of that is this is stifling reverberation, stifling resonance, it's stifling everything about the cymbal, and this can lead to damage. This can lead to cracking, this can lead to bell hole cracking and also edge cracking because it's sort of restricting the possibility of this energy to get distributed quickly throughout the cymbal and start to lead to, weak spots becoming breaks and things like that. If you've ever seen crash cymbals that are cracked along the lathing, it's possible that this is actually the culprit and not so much just how hard the person was striking that cymbal. Now, on the other hand, there's a lot of jazz guys who like to cinch down their ride cymbals, both for a tighter sound that's a little bit less resonant, a little bit less overtones, a little more controlled, and also, again, to keep it from moving around so much so that if you're playing really fast and especially fast and quiet, you're not having to battle the motion of that cymbal. With a ride cymbal, the possibility of breaking it doing this is a little less likely, but you still have to think about that in terms of how tightly you're willing to cinch it down and also how hard you're going to be hitting it once it is in that position because, again, you are driving the resonance into the cymbal in a different way than would naturally occur if it was allowed to move naturally. Now, the next one is a little bit of a special case. There are a couple of companies out there that make cymbal stands, that make, X hats and all that sort of stuff, where their felts themselves are very, very, very hard. The felts we normally use here are on the softer side and allow for the cymbal to move freely and do its thing. When you're dealing with felts that are super duper hard, there's kind of positives and negatives to this. On the one hand, if you cinch it down super tight with these kinds of felts, you could go even further into the possibility of damaging that cymbal kind of situation. But on the other hand, if you want to immobilize the big wagging of the cymbal when you're playing it, but at the same time not stifle it down, if you gently press hard felts against it, you're going to get less wag in the cymbal, but when you play it softly, it's still going to be able to do everything that it wants to do. So in these situations, this could be a possible alternative to really cinching it down tight with traditional felts that could, if you do it just right, it's not going to be as likely to damage the cymbal or as likely to cause it to crack around the edges as well. And last but not least is what is normally here, which is the apparatus that's on this pearl stand, which comes from pearl. Now, it's a little bit unusual in that rather than a flat or a kind of slightly angled washer underneath the felts, it actually has a dome of plastic like this, and then that felt sits on top of that, which gives it a little more ease of movement underneath. Then we have a felt on top and a kind of quick release wing nut on top. It's a plastic thing that locks in place, but you can spin it as well. It's a really unique design. And this is cool too because the wing nut actually has the sleeve built into it. So if the sleeve ever wears out, you can get a new wing nut for it, and it comes with that attached. These are great for us because it's really fast to remove if we're going through a lot of cymbals. You know, we only used one today, but sometimes it's 8 or 9 in one of these videos that we have to get through pretty quickly. And spinning wing nuts, dropping them on the floor, it's a whole thing. It's happened to all of us. So having something that can pop off instantly like that is a nice little time saver and never ends up rolling underneath the bass drum. So now that we've heard all of these things, what are the choices that we might make if we want to do this? Well, I can tell you about mine. Everybody's different, everybody's music is different, and every player is a little bit different in terms of the way that they hit things and connect with the instrument. For me, I like for my cymbals to move a lot, but not so much that it's a challenge for me to play them. So my normal thing is to have pretty thick felts. They're about as thick as they are wide, almost, like a barrel. And I like to have one of each of those on top, but then not cinched down super tight. My hi-hat preferences are similar, like in the clutch, for instance. I like to have cushy felts that aren't cinched down super tight because I want the dynamic range of the cymbal being able to move and to behave differently depending on how I'm striking it. And occasionally, I will have cymbals that I need to cinch down tighter, maybe like a stack kind of situation, or maybe a cymbal that's just kind of unruly and I want it to cool down. So I always bring extra felts, but I pretty much live in the soft felt world, and I never tighten them down to the point where I feel like the cymbal's sound is starting to get stifled. Once in a while, I'll be using somebody else's cymbal or use a cymbal that someone has a preference for in a recording session or something like that where I need to control it from the center. But even in those situations, I'm not going to cinch it down to the point where I can't move it freely under the felts. If the thing is behaving strangely, I'll move to adding tape or gels or something to it before I would crank it down on the stand. It's worth noting also that some of the jazz guys who I love who do like a tighter cymbal sound by tightening down the felts, they play with very light sticks and with also not a super aggressive touch. So the likelihood that they're going to break those cymbals when they're cinched down like that is a little bit less because of the sort of player they are and the actual mass behind the stick that they're using. So there is wiggle room with all of these things. None of them is a total no-no. It's just about understanding what you're dealing with so that you can avoid breaking these important instruments. That about wraps it up for today. There's lots more to talk about with felts. We didn't get into hi-hats. We didn't get into different diameters of felts and things like that. But the great thing, again, about these is they are inexpensive. They're a fun thing to experiment with, and they do affect the behavior of your cymbal. So, if you've got stories about felts, we would love to hear them. I have more. We'll get to them. And yeah, that's about it.